You mean
So
you can control your own money?
for those who are not familiar with a self-direct IRA, just give a basic example of what it looks
Real
like.
quick, how's that go?
Well, so basically, it's the ability to control what you invest in instead of giving your money to a third party and crossing your fingers that they're actually going to do something with it
Yeah.
and not just lose it all.
So people who are in jobs have 401ks, right? People outside the company may have IRAs, but they don't realize that you can actually take the IRA and not be in the stock market.
Exactly.
You can go into real estate, you can buy notes, you get all that kind of thing. So then you're self-directing your retirement account, which is awesome.
Yes. And you're also assuming the risk along with that.
Yeah.
There's always when you're doing investments, there's always some risk of a loss. But our philosophy was, well, look, if you watch your 401k over a period of time, they lose your money too. When stocks take a dip, they lose your money, and it takes forever for it to climb back and recover.
Yeah.
Because back in 2008, I remember that happened to my in-laws. They're very close to retirement, and if your retirement accounts take a 20 or 30% hit,
ouch,
that put a lot of people back to either they had to extend out their retirement, they couldn't retire, or they had to come out of retirement and start working again. So looking at that, thinking, okay, we can manage this too. Let's just put our own destiny in our own hands and go forward with that. So I'm involved with Note School. I'm being a student, doing the things that Eddie says do, and just continuing to learn. And
so share about when you first discovered Notes. How fast did you jump into buying your first? How did that process go for you?
And what attracted you? That's the other thing I'm curious about. Why was that?
So the reason Notes were really attractive is once really, so Eddie really explained it to a point where you start catching the vision, when you start going into, and I'll not to get too far in the weeds, but when all the different potentials that you could do with a note, selling a partial, pledging the note, all these different things that I never really knew or thought of that existed, that just gives you more opportunities. Plus, I like the fact of no tenants and no toilets.
Ooh, I like that.
That was probably the biggest thing. The first thing that stuck out to me is, so you mean I actually get real cash flow, and I'm not dealing with tenants and toilets, and I can hire third-party servicing to manage all this activity for me, and it's a flat fee? Because as you guys all know, if you have a rental house and you're dealing with a property manager, they take a percentage.
Sure.
Right.
It's not a flat fee, it's a percentage.
Right.
I didn't like that. I like the flat fee much better.
Yeah.
So tell us about your
a lot of people coming from the landlord space. That's a huge draw. Wait, I don't have to fix a toilet anymore.
It is.
We did it. We've been there, right? I didn't jump straight to Notes. I was a landlord first because that's the simplest way to get into real estate. You have a loan from a bank. You have a tenant. They pay more than your mortgage payment. You're great.
Yeah.
And that's all. Anybody normally, when people first get into real estate, you can sell a house, you can rent a house. That's pretty much all we know.
Right.
Those are the options. You can rent it or sell it. And then same with you, and I got into Notes, I'm like, wait a second, I can do all of these other things, plus I still have those two options available to me. Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, exactly. And
so, a huge box up, this brand new world of like, wait a minute. And the idea of becoming the bank, right? Our pitch line.
Exactly. And the great thing is you don't have to come through the traditional real estate world to do that. You can do it. I know my path is opposite from most people, but that's okay. That tends to be what happens to me in life with everything. I tend to do things or I get to the same destination as a lot of people. I just get there differently.
So we talked earlier before we brought you on about seller finance and the knowledge and experience that a lot of seller finance people who are listening to us who are not sure about buying notes, but they're originating notes. Talk a little bit about your experience with seller finance notes and how that is a replacement for the banking system right now.
Well, so my experience with seller finance notes is a few different things, because after you've been in the note business for a few years and you've looked at notes, people, I buy notes, sell notes, and I've brokered notes. You see different qualities of notes. You start seeing the things that make a note more valuable than other things. And especially when you're part of a community of note investors like Note School, you are able to actually, it gives you a standard, because you don't know what is good and what is bad when you first get into the note business. It just, everything kind of looks like gravy at first, because it's not tenants and toilets. You're like, oh, it's a $200 P&I is great because it's not tenants and toilets. Oh, well, not necessarily. A $200 P&I is not going to get you a lot of velocity.
Yeah.
So you start learning that certain people, they go out and they create notes that aren't great. Like a lot of times I see these young guys that go out and they get into notes. Maybe they were in wholesaling or they were in fix and flipping, but they'll obtain a house. Maybe it's a house out in the country. They got it cheap. They were able to find, they didn't do anything to the house. They were able to find a borrower to put in the house as is without doing anything to it. They got enough money on the down payment to cover what they have into it. And now they have a 30-year note and they're collecting payments. But oh, by the way, they didn't really vet the borrower. They just found somebody with the down payment. So you don't necessarily have a good borrower. And in the end, as you guys know, that doesn't yield a very good note. It's not a note that's, when you want to sell that note, that's not a note that true investors want to buy. And if they are going to buy it, it's going to be heavily, heavily discounted.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That takes me right back 2009 when I was first creating notes, and I didn't even know they were called notes, but that we were doing that, selling it on terms, and they were terrible. They were terrible borrowers. The paperwork was really substandard, but
right. But what I've learned through Note School is you want your paper to look as close to bank paper as you can possibly get. You want the underwriting. I love the fact if I come across a note that the borrower is paying the servicing fee, fantastic. I love that, because that just makes your yield go up as the note investor.
Yeah, exactly.
All of these things that actually a well-vetted borrower, nice asset. If I'm going to sell a partial, I don't want a Beverly Hillbilly house that's out in the country that looks all run down. That's not what I want to show to my partial investor, because your partial investor is just a passive person, right? Or it's supposed to. You don't want to show them a shack and say, well, this is what's backing up your money. You want to show them it doesn't have to be an expensive house. It just has to look like a decent house that you could actually see someone living in and paying for 30 years.
Sure.
So what was your learning curve like? Like, I know you got into Note School and that's a fantastic education program.
Yeah.
What was like coming from, corporate America into landlording and just kind of into some basic real estate stuff? How did you go from there to there? And what was that like? Was that fire hose kind of level stuff, or how did that go?
Oh, it's completely fire hose. Everything's new. All the terminology is different than what I'm used to. The paperwork's different from what I'm used to. The math is different from what I'm used to. Every single aspect is completely different than what I'm used to. So much so that you have to completely rewire, or at least I did. I had to completely rewire my brain and my way of thinking. In fact, you guys know a guy by the name of Pat Precourt?
I don't.
Have you ever heard of Pat Precourt? He's a big mindset guy that we talk about a lot in Note School.
Okay.
And one of the sayings that sticks out to me still to this day that he said is, in order to do something that you've never done, you must become someone you've never been.
Yes, I've heard that saying before. Absolutely.
And that rings so true. If you're trying to do, because I didn't do a pivot. I did a 180. I've completely burned the ships as far as engineering. I'm not going back to that world.
Yeah.
This is my life. I'm in the note investing world. This is who I am now. So to get there.
But what part of your W-2 helped you become a note buyer? Was there a part of the W-2 that kind of prepared you for the note buying space that you pulled in?
It's hard to identify one specific thing. I think it's just a combination of life experience. Okay. And I pull in just life experience whenever I can, because everybody has different backgrounds. So you use your background and experience, whatever that looks like. I did a lot. Part of my role as an engineer, because people hear engineer and they think you're a numbers geek, right? I think all I did was sit behind a desk and do calculus all day. And that's not true. There's so many different kinds of engineering jobs out there.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did in my engineering job was a lot of auditing and auditing of vendors. So I would fly to France, I would fly to Spain, I would fly to Milwaukee, wherever the vendor was, and I'd walk into their facility and I'd spend 2 or 3 days there and I would audit every aspect of their facility. Well, there's a lot of things you have to be able to kind of pick up on quickly in order to be able to comprehend, are they following their procedures? Are they following their work instructions? Are they following our instructions? We're the customer and we send purchase orders to these guys. Are they following our purchase order? And you have to be able to go into a company and figure all that stuff out very quickly and assemble all this into a report. You had to meet with executives. So there's just a lot of life experience that I've just kind of folded into what I'm doing, being able to just talk, on webinars with you guys and not be shy, because you can't be shy in this business. You guys talk about it's relational, right?
Yeah.
Relational it's so important. You have to build relationships in this business.
So we all have our stuff that we're not good at in this space, right? Tell us a little bit how you overcame some of the struggles you had, and what have you done to, either get better at that struggle or done all the things to overcome it?
Sure. I think one of the struggles is putting yourself out there, being on webinars, putting yourself in front of a camera, being able to say what you think and have some confidence behind it. I think that's such a tricky thing. And I think it intimidates a lot of people. So one of the things I did that's been really key for the last couple of years of helping me through that is I joined a Toastmasters club.
Ooh.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with Toastmasters.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if anyone out there listening is not, go to toastmasters.org, and it's a communications club. They have many clubs that are virtual. Since COVID, a lot of clubs have become virtual. Some clubs are hybrid. They do in-person and Zoom, and then some are in-person only. But find a club that speaks to you, that you can get involved with, and you learn to speak in front of people. You learn to write speeches and then give those speeches in front of a group of people. And then you also learn to take criticism, because part of it is called an evaluation. So once you give a speech, you're given an evaluation. Now it's a constructive evaluation. So they'll tell you, here's what you did great, and here's what you could accelerate at or do better at. And then maybe here's something that you could work on in the future, and end it with something, again, nice, kind of make it a sandwich, an evaluation sandwich. And it teaches you to be able to take a certain amount of criticism. And when you look at comments on anything that you've done, you can real quickly weed out the ones who are just making nasty comments to be mean, and those who are making comments that maybe will actually benefit you. And it's something that's like, okay, that's a good point. I need to look at maybe tweaking that and do better next time.
Yeah.
I'd say that Toastmaster was probably the biggest thing. And then the next biggest thing is working the financial calculator. I remember financial calculator used to intimidate me so much, But after a while, I found that as a weakness. And I kind of have the mentality that when I find things about myself that are weaknesses, I lean into that. A lot of times, but a lot of times people make a mistake, I think, of they take that weakness and they set it off on the shelf somewhere, and then I'll deal with that weakness later.
Or hide it, right? Put it in the closet and say the boogeyman. Put them in the boogeyman in the closet. I don't want to deal with it because I'm scared of it, right?
Right. But it will always be a weakness until you fix it. Until you address it head on and make it a strength, it'll always be a weakness.